One of the coolest new products I saw at this year's NAB was a new smart adapter from Aputure. It's an EF to micro four thirds or E-mount adapter, and basically what it does is it allows for electronic and focus control over EF lenses. So essentially what that means is you can finally control Canon glass on a micro four thirds or E-mount camera. Now, Metabones has some adapters already that allow electronic aperture or iris control of the lens, but to my knowledge, this is the only one that allows for aperture and focus control, and it was pretty cool how they did it. The Metabones adapter takes the Canon EF electronic signal and converts it to the mount. So whether it's Sony E-mount or micro four thirds, whatever it is, it gives those electronics and it sends that signal directly to the camera. So the camera reads the aperture value and it knows what the lens is set to. The new smart adapter from Aputure actually kind of bypasses that. It's a smart adapter that attaches to the lens and gets the electronics, but rather than sending that to the camera, it sends it to kind of a handheld controller. And on the controller, you have a dial for your focus and for your iris setting, which is really nice and kind of a smart way to do it so that you don't have to send the electronic signal all the way to the camera and make sure that the formats are matching up. You just send the information to this external wireless hand controller and you get all your controls right there. So I don't believe, well, they weren't quite sure on the final specification for all this stuff, but they were saying that you could hook that handheld controller back up to the camera so you have record triggering and that kind of stuff. But I wasn't sure if the actual information is then sent to the camera via that controller. I doubt it. So you'd probably still have to do something like shoot without a lens, and you wouldn't have your iris or aperture information directly on the camera, which most of the time is fine because you can just set it with this wireless handheld controller. And I played with it and it worked surprisingly well. There was very little lag, almost no lag, and you could do some really interesting rack focusing because all this Canon glass, it's got autofocus built in. Now this gives you control over that to where you're not relying on the camera to do focusing for you. You can kind of do it. So some of the really high-end, really expensive follow focus units that are kind of doing mechanical focusing on the lens, you've got that right now electronically via this wireless handheld device. And they were saying that they're selling this thing for around like $350 or something like that. So it's, certainly reasonably priced for what you're getting, because the only other option is the Metabones adapters, which do a very similar thing. And like I said, you're not getting focus control, you're just getting iris control. And another great thing that Aputure is doing is they're making a regular standard version that gives you everything we just talked about, but they're also making a version that has a lens element in there for additional speed booster or lens turbo type adjustments. So you're actually getting that expanded field of view, you're shrinking down the image, getting that extra stop of light. So most people who are familiar with that, prefer that, especially when shooting with micro four thirds, so you can kind of fake a larger sensor size, and that's really valuable. So I'm excited to see. They said the speed booster version will be around, I think it was closer to $500 or $600 for that version, and this stuff is coming out pretty soon. They said the regular version will be out by the end of the month and the speed booster version will come later. So I'm excited to play around with them. They had both micro four thirds and E-mount versions at the booth to play around with. So I'm glad we're finally getting some other options. Metabones stuff, their stuff is really good. I've used it on numerous shoots, as well as some of the knockoff version speed boosters, and I like it. But I'm glad to see some other option, especially something that's giving wireless focus control, because that's really cool.